Before we dive into Antwerp, Belgium, I wanted to address a comment I had recently on the channel. The question was asked, is this a conspiracy channel? Well, let's take a look at the definition of conspiracy. Conspiracy is a plan by a group of people intended to be implemented in secret, sometimes for a nefarious or unwelcome purpose, is included in the definition. And a conspiracy theory is an explanation of some event that appeals to a conspiracy and is a counter to an official explanation. So my answer to that question would be a resounding yes. You have stumbled upon, probably unknowingly if you're asking me that question, the mother of all conspiracies here on this channel. And we put the city of Antwerp, Belgium, under the microscope in this video. I almost did Ghent. Here, I do have a file on Ghent as well. And then I quickly diverted over to Antwerp at the last second. It has a couple of my favorite pieces of old world architecture. And if we look at the population demographics down through time, and you can see here that in the modern day we're looking at about 300,000, and it does say that this is the city of Antwerp, not the surrounding area, but we'll just focus on that for now. But you can see the growth happening here in the 1800s, much like many of the cities we've seen in North America. Now, they wouldn't have the same explanation that we will be getting in North America, that there was mass immigration, yet we still see a similar pattern of population growth, which is interesting. And we're going to find some similarities, other similarities, with the North American continent, as far as things like World's Fairs go, and also construction timelines. Now, the expectation would be when we look at a city like Antwerp, that much of this architecture should have been built at an earlier time period than the time period we're told for North America. We get most of the buildings being built in the late 1800s, early 1900s in North America. Now, the assumption would be that a place like Antwerp, Belgium, a lot of this would have been up for several hundred years. And my suggestion is that that is true, that this is older architecture than we are being told, but the historical narrative tells us otherwise, as we'll see moving forward. And of course there are the structures that they will date back several hundred years, usually cathedrals, things along those lines, castles. But as you'll see, much of this type of architecture with the spires going up at that same time period that we see in North America, which is interesting. Another thing we see here with these old postcards is the prominence of the rail car. Now, the rail car narrative happens everywhere at the same time as far as the streetcars go, as being part of an infrastructure of the city. This is an old hall for one of the train stations. And you get early depictions of Antwerp being a star fort city. And like I always say, I don't know what to make of the timelines on a lot of these maps. I think a lot of history was rewritten and everything was put into a box, so it's hard to say with any certainty unless you were willing to trust these orders that were in place taking care of the historical narrative. It's hard to say with any certainty what we're looking at for a timeline. You can't really hang your hat on a map from what says it's from the 1500s or the 1600s, I don't think. This is just a taste of the type of architecture we're going to be seeing. We also have an early painting, this one going back supposedly again to the 1600s. Now take a look at the architecture that would be a cathedral, and we'll be seeing that as we move forward. But we are getting an indication that many of these structures were standing back then. And the way they explain that in historical narrative sometimes is that these structures were destroyed or burnt down and rebuilt in almost the same way they were previously. And I think as you dig deeper into the historical narrative, it starts to read like fiction. And that's what I'm trying to do here on this channel, is to bring you a lot of these stories and a lot of these visuals and give you an idea of what I'm thinking at the time, and of course allow you to make up your own mind about history. And you can see the canals very prominent as well in Antwerp. A lot of the river systems and canals, the infrastructure involved there, the difficulty to construct all of that is really off the charts. So there's something missing from our historical narrative that fails to explain how all of that was put together so readily in so many different places. And as I've mentioned previously on this channel, you're looking at very wide streets. In this case, you've got 2 tram lines, and this central area, often the central area is the tram line, and you have the horse and buggies on either side. Nonetheless, the civil engineering that went on here to allow for that mode of transportation indicates that this city was laid out for that purpose, and not necessarily this was a more recent invention that was accommodated for. That doesn't make sense when you look at the width of the streets themselves. And we're going to see all sorts of statue work and very elaborate ornamentation, which is what we have been taught about Europe. The expectation is that Europe contains all of these structures, but North America didn't really do that, or if they did, it was a copycat. And as I've mentioned on this channel, covered over 100 cities in North America, indicating that this architecture was also on the North American continent. But I think it is helpful to look at places like Antwerp to give us a sense of the similarities of the infrastructure. For instance, I have seen many places in North America that share a similar view to what we're looking at here, with the style of buildings. This is very interesting, these towers. Also, even the light posts or lamp posts themselves with the curled ornamentation going on there, very familiar looking. You've got buildings, triangular shaped buildings built into the infrastructure. Some spectacular views here. This is the Grand Place. We'll be taking a look at that, dating back to several hundred years, this area here. Although it's sort of a mix and match, and you have fire narratives burning these places down and rebuilding, and it's the same story no matter where you look. The 2 separate hotels, we'll be taking a closer look at those, looking identical to each other and absolutely breathtaking. We also have the shadowy, top-hatted individuals in the foreground here, and the very overdressed people of the time, an indication potentially that these are people unfamiliar with the setting. You often see that, especially on beachfronts, when they're still fully clothed and taking in the pleasures of the beachfront, but almost like they're don't feel natural to the area. And I mentioned some of my favorites coming out of Antwerp. This is one of them, the Central Station. Just a sneak peek before we get into some of the specific buildings. More of this elaborate dome and cupola style ornamentation going on in the foreground here. The streetcar in full effect. You've got that concrete or stone railing systems that are very familiar. You've got the brick paved roads, central fountains and statues, all looking very familiar, indicating potentially we're looking at a worldwide civilization that employed many of these same building methods. We'll get down to specifics now. We get to the Cathedral of Our Lady, a spectacular structure. Here we have some narrative for you. Started in 1352, and the first phase of construction ends in 1521, but it's never been completed. It's interesting. Still working on it, I guess. But we'll take a look at it in the modern day. Obviously a very imposing, tremendous structure. Very detailed. You can imagine 700 years ago, 600 years ago. The construction of this, and no doubt they'll tell us they're made of stone, but if we look closer you can actually see what we're looking at is brick, and potentially a damaged brick going on here. And also history will have to tell us that much of this was hand carved, the suggestion being that much of the ornamentation and statue work not so much stone, but some sort of mold system was employed potentially to construct a lot of this. And they don't appear to be hand carved. And when you get to the interiors, they're absolutely breathtaking, absolutely ornate beyond comprehension. And the precision, the level of accuracy and precision for 600, 700 years ago is off the charts. So this Cathedral of Our Lady ticking all those boxes. Also, we have a pipe organ, very elaborate pipe organ, and what looks like a clock having been installed on this after the fact. Certainly not looking like it's a part of that original construction. And I hope you understand what I mean, that where this stuff does not appear to be carved. It seems like a different technology was used for a lot of this. And there's another indication of the stonework looking inconsistent. Very strange. Beautiful structure, though. There would be the underside of the dome. We've got a painting at the very top of the underside of the dome. A closer look at some of the statue work going on here. Marvelous. And I don't have a name for the structure, unfortunately. If anyone watching this knows a little bit more about Antwerp, you could put that in the comment section. I certainly appreciate a little bit of added backstory, even if it is narrative backstory. This looking like what we might call a gingerbread style that we've seen a lot in North America as well. Some of the buildings with the red and the white interchangeable like that has been termed gingerbread style. So this is the central station I was talking about, and as you can see, while you feast your eyes, it's absolutely breathtaking. And we're told it was built between 1895 and 1905. Now, obviously, that timeline coincides with much of what was going on in North America. Many of the train stations we're told were built in North America were said to have been built at that same time. And I think the attempt here is to fit a lot of this architecture and the purpose for the architecture into the historical timeline that we are expected to believe. Here it is in the modern day, still looking spectacular, but not quite as spectacular. If you look at the front window portion here, looking modern, and this portion here, you can really see the difference, and that really jumps out at you. The glasswork there, but spectacular nonetheless. And supposedly at the turn of the 20th century, this is what they were doing in Antwerp, Belgium. And my suggestion, of course, if you're familiar with the channel, is that these are older, much older, or history as we know it is complete fabrication. And there was technologies and know-how that we are not privy to in the modern day that have been obscured from our understanding. And this is some of that interior. You can see how spectacular the stonework is in here, the columns, arches. It's absolutely breathtaking, breathtaking. And at the time, Antwerp, about 270,000 people living there. So not a small city, but not absolutely massive like some of the metropolises we're familiar with as well. This would be the backside of that same train station. And I remember stumbling upon this structure when I started this research, and had to pick my jaw up off the floor, as I assume you are as well if you're not familiar with the structure. They give us a construction photo from 1903, so we're being told that this is 2 years away from completion, and you can see the roof is completed up there, and they're still working on the domes. Very typical of construction photos is to chop the dome part off and make it look like they're still working on it. I don't believe. I think these are fabrications to bolster the fabricated timeline of our founders, if you will, of the New World inheritors. So this would be that city hall in that Grand Place. We're told erected in 4 years, 1561 to 1562. So here's that timeline we would expect from some of these cities. But again, you're still seeing that style of building that we saw in the cathedral, where it almost looks like something beyond stone. Like there's a cement coating going on with a lot of the building materials here. And we look at some of the interior, the breathtaking interiors as well, the columns. Remember, they're telling us it's from the 1500s, so very murky timelines with these old structures. There's throughout the ages modifications that get done, and it gets very, very difficult to discern what was built when. I think even if you were to do a tour there would be a lot of confusion as to what was built when in these places, and it's just a shrug of the shoulders. St. James Church in 1491, they began construction. Apparently it was not completed until 1656. So again, those really long cathedral construction times. And again, we're seeing what appeared to not be carved stone, as history would suggest, but in fact something else altogether. There's the underside of this magnificent structure. And as we look at the exterior, right away my thought is that this has been decapitated and once had a much taller spire than it does, and has been modified, as so many places have. Because this flat top not making any sense for the weight of the tower itself. But I couldn't find any visuals to confirm that. But absolutely breathtaking. No question about it. And here's a painting of this church from that early time period. This amazing pipe organ you have to walk under, still in existence, and here it is in the modern day, again to give you a taste. And you have curved stones for the columns, just to give you a taste of how amazing the architecture is and how simple the seating is. Always interesting how the seats don't match the building themselves, I find, in these churches and cathedrals. But we get more street scenes, cobbled streets, everything very well built, and a lot of tech coming off the tops of these structures. Another street scene, and I have seen these quite a bit in my research as well, these big... now you might call them backers for billboards, for signs, but I don't think so. I think there was a different purpose going on there. Something to look out for if you're doing this type of research. Streetcars looking like they've been a part of the infrastructure since its inception. Several World's Fairs. This is 1885. And you can see the type of architecture that they're depicting here. And they're saying these World's Fairs were a way for these cities to burst onto the scene, the world scene, if you will. Here's a look at what you may have encountered at the World's Fair in 1885. This is from 1894. Let me just jump. There's the 1894 World's Fair, right in that timeline with the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. The year following, we have the exposition in Antwerp. And this would be the Congolese human zoo that they had at the World's Fairs. I encountered this in my Madrid video, and I've seen this in many of the World's Fair videos, and a very ugly part of the World's Fair narrative. And just to show you some of the architecture that they would have had at the World's Fair, and a very strange feature that I have never come across before, and I'm pleased to bring you, is this airship here. Can you see what it's supporting? Here, I have a better depiction here. It's a castle in the air. And this was advertised as being a part of the exposition. How very interesting. An indication, again, of technologies lost. Isn't there a anime video? Castle in the Sky or something like that? Makes me think of a lot of things that we've lost along the way, and what happened in the past. And that really is the point of this channel, is for us to explore a lot of this architecture, and to come to an understanding that what we're told about the past is inaccurate, and a way for us to put our heads together and come up with other ideas for what potentially may have been in the past. We saw this view earlier on. Again, you can see the big billboard type structure along the top. indicating something to do with energetics. If you look at the top here, it's very interesting. It's a pretty good view of that Cafe Neptune. These would be the guild halls in that Grand Place again. We're told there's 16th century architecture, and the fountain in the foreground was apparently built in 1887. Very interesting looking square, city square. The guilds, eh? We have the Gare du Sud, opened on July 1878, demolished in 1965. Very prominent looking structure. 1878. Again, we're touching on the timelines that we get in North America for many of these structures. This is the replacement that they built after they tore it down. Grand Hotel Metropole, built in 1899. Again, the bells should be going off. Look at the statue work, the ornamentation, the Beaux-Arts style. There's a little look at the peak, the dome, and the cupola, gilded, but showing all those indications of the similarities that we see on the cathedrals. And also we have the, is that a wreath of some sort? Not sure what she's carrying there. Built in 1899, I find that very difficult to believe. We also have the Grand Hotel Weber with its dome on the corner, and a sneak peek at the dining area. You can see this one's supposedly built in 2 years, according to this architect's plan. So you have that same storyline. You have the phantom architects, the miracle workers, the architects that were drawing these up, and then they just get built in a very short time period. So a lot of this video is to highlight to you the fact that no matter where we look, we get the same backbone to the historical narrative. We get different names, different places, but we get very similar backstories. There's that Grand Hotel. There's the train station I showed you. We will be looking at this opera house a little bit later on as well. But we'll keep moving forward. It's a good size file. Just a nice look at that Grand Place again. The Het Steen, I'm sure that's a castle Steen, I believe. It's built between 1200 and 1225 as a gateway to a larger castle of the Dukes of Brabant, which was demolished in the 19th century. Okay. We do see some indications of damage here on the stones themselves. Now, if you're aligning yourself with the conventional historical narrative, you'll just say that's weathering, wear and tear, but what I see is a definite difference here in the building materials themselves. An indication potentially that there's some damage that went on here, and that it's some sort of electrification that damaged this thing. I'll even go so far as to suggest possibly that this was a brick structure at one point. Now you have to go pretty deep down the meltology rabbit hole to be able to swallow that suggestion, but if you do, be prepared for your paradigm to be overturned quite easily. And we get a little bit more of that castle, and again a look at the castle. This is really showing us the difference here. It looks like something happened there. Another thing I noticed with Antwerp, and I have noticed it in other cities, Copenhagen would be another one, is the what I would consider to be almost a dark statue or artwork that has been placed all over these cities. It's almost like a capturing invading force, putting their stamp on what was once beautiful, and you get this type of stuff. I don't have much appreciation for a lot of this modern art. The Hippodrome, also dating from the same time period, 1903. Now this is the Hippodrome nearing its end, we're being told. Although it looks quite early, doesn't it? Actually this is probably construction, sorry about that. Probably tell us this is a construction photo. I don't know how much I believe that. Here's the Hippodrome in all its glory. Sure would like to have seen the interior of that. And here we see it on the left side of this beautifully cobbled, massively wide street. We also see the Lyric Theatre, I believe we'll be seeing that later on as well, near the end of the video. And there we have the Hippodrome once more. And let me just go back. You notice the statues have been removed at this point. And we've got a lot more ornamentation going on in the front of this. And of course the poor little buggy and the poor horse. Yeah, old world narrative. I think all of history, no matter where you come from, we have been reset. Everything has been reprogrammed. We've been diminished. Our history has been diminished and obscured from us. Here's the old customs house. I think they're telling us 1907. Can't confirm that one. That's a tough one to look up. Okay, let me get to the Hotel Wagner here on the left. So we saw the Opera House, and we saw a Hotel Weber on the right side of the Opera House. This is the Hotel Wagner on the left side of the Opera House, built in 1905. And of course the Opera House again, which we have yet to look at. We'll keep going. An interesting arch in the middle of the city with its lions and symbolism. And now we get a little taste of the World War I damage that went on in Antwerp, looking very similar to the Great Fires, the depictions of the Great Fires that we've looked at here on this channel. Something to keep in mind, and the good possibility that what was going on with those two great wars of the 20th century, it was the destruction of the old world and the erasing of the memory of the people of the world. I think there's much more going on than the History Channel version of those events. Another look at that devastation. Looking very familiar. Alright, we have the waterfront with the castle. And the canals again, remember? A lot of nice postcards that I was able to find for you, and they just really paint that picture, don't they? I don't even know these structures, but they just pop domes everywhere you can see as you look down. And the tech on top of them. So harnessing of the ether, old world technology. The pilotage. This building said to have been built 1890 to 1895. I do believe if this one was depicted in that painting from the 15 or 1600s. It looked very similar, and it looked to be in a very similar location. But it's a magnificent structure, and again, now what they're doing here, unexpectedly, I didn't expect this, is cramming the construction of so many of these buildings into basically a 2-decade period. Here's another one, 1904. This is the Opera House I was talking about, so they're telling us that all three of these were going up right around the same time. 3-year construction on this Opera House in 1904. It still stands. Certainly would be a place to go check out if you're in Antwerp, I would imagine. So much to see. There's a really nice look at it. And remember too, like, based on when this photograph was taken, how old would this be at the time? Less than 10-15 years, no question. This has got to be a pre-World War I photograph. This thing is looking ancient. And a little sneak at the interior before we move forward. I wasn't sure what was going on here. I saved the postcard because of the structure in the background and the circular gate on top of this peak. Interesting looking building. Thought I would include it. The National Bank in Antwerp, the structure in the background here. 1878, we're told this one was built. And let's look a little closer. Get the horse statue here. I'm guessing that maybe once upon a time this was a fountain. That's been a working hypothesis I've had for a while now. There's the magnificent looking National Bank. 1878. Older, I think. There it is. What do you think? I think it's much older. Beautiful looking structure again. And looking very weathered and old. Unique looking as well, with all of its cones and domes and cupolas. Oh my. Alright, the Pagador Tower, I'll just keep moving forward here. There it is in the modern day. Bit of tech on top of that one. Coming to the Palace of Justice, the original Palace of Justice, we're told, or the previous. There's a 3-year construction time in the 1870s. And again, let's get a sense of the architecture and we can come to our own conclusions about what they tell us about history. Still stands but not used as the Palace of Justice, and not to be confused with the Palace of Justice in Brussels, which is an absolute stunner. You want to look that one up if you're not familiar with it, but make sure you're sitting down. And there's just a quick look at some of the interior on this structure, and let me show you the new Palace of Justice. You might want to hide your eyes if you're not ready for this postmodern garbage. There. That's the new Palace of Justice. Do I need to say more? We've lost something, folks, that's for sure. And I believe this is part of that church we looked at earlier too, the onion, very unique shaped spring onion dome almost, without the leaves on top. We'll keep moving forward though. The Planten Museum. I have a few looks at that. This is some of the interior. I didn't get the timeline on that. Old though, looking very old. There's that courtyard again. And again, we're going postmodern, so you might want to hide your eyes for this one. This is the Port House. Very strange structure. Actually, let me get to what it once looked like. So there's the original Port House structure, and you see this boxed off area on the top. Well, it's boxed off because it once had a tower like this. And what they have done in the modern day, I think, again, an attempt in a show of domination over the old world, is my suggestion here, at a very deep subconscious level. Of course, I'm not saying all the architects involved were consciously doing this. I'm saying that this is something that's happening at a very subconscious level for humanity. Is they're showing that the symbol of the domination over the old world with the new world crap, as far as I'm concerned. Alright, the Royal Athenaeum, 1882 to 1884, 2-year timeline. Very large structure, hard to tell here, but as we look from above you can see very large and open courtyard on the interior there. Very short timeline on that, 2 years, come on, in the 1880s. Give me a break. Hard to believe. Alright, we come to that. This is the Royal Museum. We did see this earlier. I think I said it was a theater. But this is the Royal Museum. 1884, opened in 1890, completed in 1894. So it was open for 4 years, I guess, before it was completed. I don't know. I did do a video on opera houses, and reminding me a lot of the shape. That's probably why I made the mistake. The building style here, looking very familiar as well. Interesting ornamentation in the foreground and up top as well. You've got these winged creatures, angels on chariots, and you've also got these statues here built right into the architecture. Spectacular. There it is again. And a taste of some of the interior, no doubt been whitewashed down through time, but still showing how marvelous the construction is. The St. Charles Borromeo Church, built in 1615 to 1621. It's only 6 years as a Jesuit church of Antwerp. Take a look at how detailed the ornamentation is there. And it does seem the churches retain the age in the historical narrative. They're able to date these things back a lot further than many of the other structures. I'll just go through some of the interior of this one. Built in the 1600s, we're told. I do believe that all of this architecture that we're looking at is originally pre-reset. I think there was a major reset here, probably a series of minor resets, and then intentional resetting by the controllers who implemented the New World agenda that has been rolling out all throughout our lifetimes. There's definitely the possibility that many of these structures were modified, whether it be through the ornamentation, the statues, the spires. So maybe not all of these structures are as they were originally, and so of course just a hypothesis, but I think much of this is from the old world. Just a look at some of the interior there. We come to another church, Saint Norbert. We have a couple different names, but I found it in the modern day as Saint Norbert of Xanten Church, laying the foundation stone 1902, opened 1904. And now that would be less than 2 years. You know, I think they just should have said it was built in the 1600s and it took them 50 years. Be a more believable story. But no, it's a 2-year wonder in the early 20th century. I find it very hard to believe. What about you? You think the reason that we don't do this anymore is just because styles have changed? Or is there more to the story going on here? Every indication that this is much older. St. Paul's, completed and dedicated in 1571. There we go. Now we're digging back in time again. The church is getting that old narrative. Don't really know when it started. Very murky again. Spectacular. How many amazing churches did they have here in Antwerp? Another pipe organ with the entryway underneath. Check out the statue work going on here. Amazing. And again, just a taste of that interior. And then the painting. We get a painting again of that very ornate pipe organ. Who was doing these paintings? Was this really the way life was 400 years ago? Or are they trying to depict something that didn't actually happen? I've got questions. I remember I talked earlier about looking like the materials themselves have been modified. Again, we're getting indications here that some of these are perfect rectangles, much like a brick, not so much like a stone, and that there's some damage going on here. Look as we get in a little closer, and of course we come to this area here, and it looks absolutely melted. Now, I don't know how else you apply logic to that and say, okay, well, this is just the grotto portion, and they just mortared together whatever rubble they could find and made it a grotto. I don't know. I don't think so. I think that this is evidence of damage. That's kind of where I'm at. Of course, you don't have to be there with me. This is my journey, and I'm happy to share it with you, and you're on your journey. And I always appreciate when you share your input on what you're seeing in these videos as well. It helps me to formulate and modify my opinions as well. Now, this is the festival hall. I think this is what that's trying to say here. Built in 1908. Okay, busy time, busy time. Before the Great Conflagration, and some of the interior of the festival hall here. Before we move on to... Now, this was very mysterious. I came across it late in my research on Antwerp, this stock exchange, which is surprising because it's one of the claims to fame. And I really couldn't come up with a photograph of the exterior of this place. We're looking at a drawing. We're told this was going right back to the 1500s, supposedly the first stock exchange in the world. There's several fires it goes through. This one apparently rebuilt in 1872 after a fire. And this is when they glassed over the top. This is a depiction of that going on in the 1870s. And it still stands. It looks like it's in ruin. And it's just very curious because I really couldn't find a good visual of the exterior of the structure. Some more looks at the interior. And you can see the rubble here on the ground. But you take a look at how ornate this place was, or is. But really, it's not what it used to be, that's for sure. Absolutely spectacular. Very strange story. Again, if anyone can get any more information on this structure or can find a visual of the exterior, email that to me. I'd love to see it. Like if you can get like a black and white from the turn of the century or something like that. All I could get was this of the upper portions, and we're just getting a confirmation of the date, right? 1872. Yeah, well, thanks. I don't know. Very strange structure, interesting story. I'm sure there's much more to this structure than what we're being told. Take a look at the brickwork. Wow. Alright, the synagogue, built in 1893. Busy time, busy time. There it is in the modern day. Nice looking structure. Coming to the end of the file here. Now we have the Royal Flemish Theatre. So I confused the two, the museum and the theatre. This is the Royal Flemish Theatre. Final plans were approved in 1884. Work began the same year. Inauguration took place on the 13th of October 1887. So we get 3 years from approval of plans to completion of structure in the 1880s. What do you think? You smell that, rat? We have this statue depiction on the top here. And I've seen this a lot. I've seen it a lot in North America with the wreath, female figure holding often a single wreath. Here we have two. There's some symbolism there too. Anyone who knows any more about this type of symbolism would love to hear about that as well. Let me read you a little bit of narrative. Violent fire ravaged the theater on 25th of May 1955, reducing much of its interior to ashes. Most of the damage was to the stage and the theater hall. Luckily, the fire took place when the theater was closed, so no one was injured or worse. Very familiar story we've seen with these structures as well. They weren't able to restore the interior decorations, as you can see. We get to the end where, let's see, the building required a major restorations and adaptations in the 90s, and they needed a modern performance hall. So what happens between 2001 and 2006? The old theater hall was demolished. So we have a 5-year time period to demolish this thing. But it goes up in, let me check again, 3 years. Classic. Classic old world BS narrative as far as I'm concerned. And this is what they managed to do to this thing. And I'd imagine they probably did retain some of the old structure. But again, you're seeing a bastardization, if you will, of what once was, I think. The Theatre Royal, or the Borla Theatre, began in 1829. The construction was delayed, but they did get to finish it in 1834. So even though construction was delayed in the early 1800s, it took them 5 years to build this thing. Okay. Cool story, bro. Some of the interior. 1830s. Why not? There's the stage view. This would be the looking from the stage. Of course, you got amazing paintings on the ceiling. Is it paintings? Possibly mosaics? No, I think it's paintings. I'm just guessing. Alright, we come to the final structure, I believe, or series of structures. The zoo in Antwerp. We're told it inaugurated in 1844. So part of the zoo stipulation on the construction of the zoo, we're told from the historical narrative, was that they had to build a museum. This is what we're looking at in the foreground here. You can see some of this structure, and also had a pipe organ, multi-storied, all sorts of decoration, paintings. It's a pretty nice zoo, if you ask me. There it is. Just a taste. I found this very interesting as well. I'm not sure what these are supposed to be. Are they supposed to be lions? Some sort of modification of a lion? Let me know what you think in the comments. All sorts of interesting structures in there too. There's an Egyptian one, and there's a lot of strangeness going on with this zoo. And there it is in the modern day with our crappy modern art. No offense to the sculptor, but something has been lost. There's no question. I hope you've enjoyed this look at Antwerp, Belgium. If you have any recommendations for cities all over the world for me to look at, put that in the comments. I will definitely take it into consideration. I read all my comments, and I will probably start a file. When I'll get to actually releasing the video, I don't know, but at least you'll be setting me on a path of discovery for that location. Alright, see you next week. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.